Robert Redford had Connecticut ties too. From 1978 through the mid-90s, he owned a home in Weston, about a mile from fellow actor, co-star and friend Paul Newman, who lived in Westport. Redford also spent time at the Westport Country Playhouse, and joining us now is the artistic director of the Playhouse, Mark Shanahan. Mark, thanks for being here. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be with you.
You met Mr. Redford. Tell us about the circumstances.
I did. It's a sad thing to mourn his loss, but some happy memories. I was lucky enough to meet him both at Sundance, but then my great memory was the first time I worked here at the Westport Country Playhouse when I was an actor in a wonderful play called Journey's End. I was giving blood in a blood drive in the lobby, and they'd put a needle inside my vein, and the woman who's doing it said, "You turned white as a sheet," but that's because I looked over her shoulder and the doors had opened to the Playhouse, and in strode Paul Newman and Robert Redford together. And individually, of course, they were two great-looking guys, but together they were just the epitome of a duo of movie stars, like they belonged to a different realm. And I got such a kick out of seeing them. In my memory, they walked together in slow motion, but they looked at all the posters of all the names on the Playhouse walls behind me out in the lobby of the great actors who've played here for nearly a century, and they were laughing and going, "Can you believe that person played here and that person?" Like two fans of great stars before them. And all I could think is, these guys are the real movie stars. And when Mr. Newman very kindly introduced me to Mr. Redford, I remember him saying, "How's the play you're doing?" And I said, "It's fantastic. It's a great cast and a great script." And he said, "Cherish those moments, because when it's all working together and it's going right, it doesn't always. It's something to remember."
They had, boy, it must have been something seeing those two walk in. If I understand this, my research here tells me that they had a history of a number of events through the years, stretching back to some time at the Playhouse. I don't know if you were involved at that time or heard about those stories. Tell me about that.
Well, at the time when I arrived here, Joanne Woodward was the artistic director, and she and Paul Newman were so instrumental in the reconstruction and the refurbishment of this beautiful theater I'm sitting in right now. And Redford was really instrumental in lending his efforts and support to that. You can find it on YouTube. It's fantastic. There's a benefit for raising money back then for the Playhouse's reconstruction, in which Redford and Newman team up once again, and they wrote a little play together where they'd had some phone calls about their lives and their friendship, and it gets a lot of laughs. And but the day I met them here at the Playhouse together, they were here to do an episode of something called The Iconoclasts, and they really reminisced. You can find that on YouTube too. They reminisced about the early days of their career and what the theater meant to them, to be able to try out their ideas on a stage in front of an audience and hone their crafts. And of course, Paul was so famous for being on our stage in our town as well, in a beautiful production. These are two guys between Sundance and all the wonderful things like Newman's Own and the Hole in the Wall Gang Camp, that they put a lot of good in the world, and those ripple effects are still felt today.
They did, and as you mentioned, there were no two bigger blockbuster stars than those two men in their day, but they always had their ties very committed to both smaller films and stage, and that legacy lives on, right?
You know, I'm glad you bring that up. It's funny. I think we all look at them as movie stars, but they were also friends. And I think the friendship and the chemistry that they had on screen, which traveled into life, is something that we all admire when we see it. But as you say, their work with Sundance, Robert Redford's work with Sundance, and his environmental activities and the way in which he put good works into the world, as did Paul Newman put great works into the world. It makes you think, maybe we look to our left and our right, and you don't have to be a big movie star to do great things and make a difference. But they led the way and set a really good example, and we can all do that with our friends too.
They sure did. The artistic director of the Westport Country Playhouse, Mark Shanahan. Mark, thank you for being here. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me on.
Mark, thank you.